Welcome to the Freedom School, an opportunity to learn about history-bending campaigns and initiatives from across the globe. We are inspired by what the Freedom Schools meant during the Civil Rights Movement in the United States, a place for alternative learning for African Americans, a safe space to discover suppressed stories of courage under oppression, the wisdom of culture, and the determination of many to make the impossible seem inevitable. This Freedom School is part of Spadework, a program that seeks to nurture and develop a new generation of organizers committed to those same principles. Learning about the historical context of these important campaigns and movement initiatives allows us to reflect more deeply about our own current challenges. Inquiring and learning is part of the organizer's Spadework. Organizers are inspired by the people we meet and the stories we share with each other. We also know that this journey never ends, and along the way we find joy and satisfaction in practicing the proven organizing adage. Listen with an open heart to the lessons others have learned and apply what you think makes sense. Then reflect, rinse, repeat. If you are inspired by what you hear, or if you want to support the development of a new generation of organizers through Spadework, then consider making a small contribution to keep this going. Go to www.spadework.school/donate right now, or simply click on the link on the chat screen. Enjoy your time together. Adelante.
Okay, good morning, good afternoon. Welcome. My name is Alex Muhammad. I'm born and raised in Chicago, but I'm actually joining this conversation today from Vegas. I currently work as the political training director for the Mass Liberation Project. And in this space, I'll be serving as co-host along with Larry for today's Freedom School session. Connected to Freedom School, we recently launched Spadework, which is an 8-month intensive campaign development and training support cohort for organizations and organizers that are on the front lines responding to systemic racism. And we're really excited to be here. Welcome to Freedom School, and I'll pass it over to you, Larry.
Thank you, Alex, and good morning, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're coming to us from with our vast global audience. My name is Larry Solomon. I will be your co-host today. I'm very excited. This is our 5th session of the Freedom School. I teach at San Francisco State University in the Department of Race and Resistance Studies, where I teach courses on community organizing, but also on movement history. And we're really good at the university at teaching, disparities, and we talk a lot about oppression. We really highlight many of the inequalities in society. But one thing we don't do as well, I think, generally speaking, is teach movement history from the perspective of organizers. And so we try to correct that. And in fact, that's part of what Freedom School is all about. You heard Alex there talk about Spadework. In fact, Freedom School goes hand in hand with Spadework. We can't really have organizer training unless we are kind of creating an understanding of today's organizers, what movement history is about, what came before them. People always talk about having to reinvent the wheel, but not really if you understand a movement history. And so that's sort of the spirit in which Freedom School emerges. And this is our 5th episode, where we have 10 of them lined up, and they've been fantastic. And we're going to expect another really great session today. So we welcome everyone. A couple of programming notes. We are live streaming on YouTube. YouTube is also where Spadeworks Freedom School channel exists. So you can always go back and take a look at our previous episodes. They'll be archived there. A couple of other real quick notes, and I want to remind people, and we'll probably remind people more than once, but we are going to have the chat function available for everyone to answer your questions. So, first half of this session, we're going to have our really great guests talk about this recent history, but also we want to highlight your questions in the second half. We have some respondent questions as well from our current organizers in training. That's going to be fantastic. Before we close today's session, we will preview next week and the upcoming weeks. So stay tuned for that programming note. But I just want to highlight that we have asked our friends and our friends of friends to be presenters, not just because they know everything about organizing, but in fact, they've participated in these campaigns from the past. And so they've got a lot to offer in terms of insights and especially lessons. This is a word you'll probably hear too much of today, but the historical lessons of organizing. So I'm going to throw it back over to Alex, who will introduce today's guest presenters. Alex.
Yeah, I'm super excited to introduce who we have today. We've got Leslie Turner joining us, who is with MassLib Nevada and also a loved one of mine. Leslie Turner has helped coordinate the Mass Liberation Project in Nevada, a decarceration grassroots activism project that's focused on ending mass incarceration in Nevada and beyond. MassLib Nevada has worked to end cash bail and reinstate voting rights for formerly incarcerated people. Thanks, Leslie. Hey, okay, there your face is. Yeah, so thank you so much for joining this conversation and sharing with us. Can you tell us, to start off, just a little bit about the work that you're currently engaged in?
Hey everyone. So the work that I'm currently engaged in is multifaceted. We're kind of involved in a lot of different initiatives at the same time, which I'm sure is the case for most organizers on the ground. One thing we're doing is policy work. So we're actively engaged in the legislative session, trying to pass bills that are that take steps towards abolition, and that end basically the criminalization of poverty in our community. We have a bill, AB 116, that is going to essentially end the being arrested for traffic violations, which is a huge problem here in Las Vegas, and in particular in Clark County, where there's a high population of Black and brown folks. And so that's kind of the policy arm. We're also raising money to start a UBI program, which I will talk about more in depth later on in the presentation. But we're kind of just experimenting with community-based solutions that are outside of the carceral state, essentially exercising and experimenting with abolition to figure out what is the solution, what is the step forward, what is it that we need to do, what are the alternatives. And we won't know if we don't actually try things and see if they work. So that's kind of where we are.
Thanks. Larry, I'm going to kick it to you.
Hi, Ryan. Well, I just wanted to welcome Leslie also. Great to meet you, and looking forward to hearing about all of that. This is one thing we keep hearing from our organizers about how much experimentation goes into the work, and these are again part of the lessons that we'll draw from, and that our organizers and residents will draw from. So welcome, Leslie. I just want to one more time remind folks to put your questions, as Leslie is presenting, to put your great questions, even your insights, into the chat. We have a great team here at Freedom School who will sort through those questions, and we will do our best to give them the light of day. Before we get to that, though, I'm going to open the floor now to Leslie Turner, our great guest from Mass Liberation Project in Nevada. Leslie, it is all yours.
So I have a slide deck, so we can go ahead and start that. But before I get started, I wanted to introduce my comrade that I brought on the presentation with me. She's a freedom fighter out here in Las Vegas. She does the work with me on the ground, and has been front lines for a number of years, in particular here in Las Vegas. So I want to introduce Tenisha Freedom. She's the co-founder of Organize the State Out Coalition. She's also a grassroots organizer And then I also just wanted to name that Organize the State Out Coalition is really going to be a groundbreaking coalition here in Nevada, which Mass Liberation Project Nevada is also a part of under Tenisha's leadership. So just wanted to name that. But she's also a grassroots organizer centered in Las Vegas with the pro-Black priority and serving the basic needs of the community and advocating anti-police terrorism projects and alternatives to policing, which obviously is tied into all of the work that we're doing. We have to be pushing back against, the state-sanctioned violence, which we continue to see in our community, even after officers have been convicted. So I just wanted to introduce her, and then now we can get into this. Okay, so first, just for me, abolition is transformation. When I think about abolition, and we'll talk a little bit about kind of the definition of abolition, and then, in particular to the prison industrial complex, but also abolition in the broader context for me personally, which is just kind of like thinking about all of the ways in which we detach ourselves from white supremacy and the ideology and the kind of mental conditioning and the way that we view society through the kind of like carceral lens, using the carceral logic, and just like really detaching from that as a part of abolition as well. Again, I'm an organizer here in Las Vegas, Mass Liberation Project Nevada, which is an affiliate of the Mass Liberation Project national organization. And we kind of started off as an organization working on mass incarceration, but particularly focused on prosecutor elections. And I think, and that is still a tactic. And I think that we've also evolved to understand that it's going to take more than taking down the carceral state in order to truly be liberated as Black folks. So that's kind of the lens in which we're going to now. We're thinking about, what does it mean to build mutual aid networks? What does it mean to create alternatives to policing in our community? What does it mean to connect in the diaspora with Black people all around the world that are fighting a lot of the same struggles that we are, and actually building, not just mobilizing, but also like building together an organizing strategy to bring forth things like reparations in the US and also in Haiti, also in Jamaica, et cetera. So that's where we're headed as far as the Mass Liberation Project goes. And with that being said, hopefully I'm still on time. I'm trying to be cognizant of time. I want to get into a grounding, which is a poem by Demetrius Noble. Definitely Google him and support artists. But I want to go ahead and play his grounding, which is very profound.
That was Ruth Wilson Gilmore in this special episode of Intercepted. We'll get back to the interview in a moment, but first I wanted to take some time for a grounding exercise. A grounding exercise is a technique that helps us to use our 5 senses to become present and move through states of distress or mounting anxiety. The following poem by Greensboro artist and organizer Demetrius Noble is entitled Poverty, Policing, Pandemic, a Black Lives Matter grounding exercise.
Inhale. Smell that righteous rage permeating from police precincts, propane with protests. I know we're in the middle of a pandemic, but I need you to pull your face mask down and smell the swell of 100,000 yells. No justice, no peace. You can literally smell the fire of our legitimate political desires whenever wind blows. You tried to hide inside, but the revolutionary aroma rolled in through busted windows. They found some rich rapping Negroes to denigrate the dark denizens who dared to remind Atlanta's black mayor that they too are citizens and are tired of living in poverty in the city that leads the nation in income inequality. With Black Lives Matter on their minds and a radical inflection point within reach, these outcasts hit the streets and told Mayor Bottoms, fuck your new Atlanta Compromise speech. Inhale. Can you smell the fear of orange monsters cringing in bunkers? See the actions of neo-fascists dispatching troops on unruly youngsters? Tear-gassing our children because they have the audacity to believe that another world is possible and won't stop until it's achieved. Smell the winds of change riding in on this new breeze. Not even your offensive line can block freedom's fragrance, Drew Brees. See established budgets crumbling from our rumblings as we demand defund the police. See charges being filed as brilliant red fires glow. Hear the chant Black Lives Matter as global protests grow. Hear essential workers on a picket line scream, no, we won't go. Feel this mighty movement from below. Witness that this powder keg is about to blow. Take off your face mask, open your mouth and belt suppress screams. Inhale and smell the city's on fire till you taste the kerosene. Say their names until you can taste our pain. Then join us on the front lines as we struggle for change. Don't let these embers cool, youngin'. Feed the flames.
Thank you. Again, I just want to shout out the artist, Demetrius Noble. Thank you so much for those powerful words. And I'm just going to take a second just so we can all just reflect on what we just heard and experienced. Because listening to that poem, it really takes me there. It takes me back to those streets. Tenisha, I don't know if you had any thoughts on the poem and that grounding.
Yeah, I think that it's great to have, artists. I think that artists are integral part of, social justice and helping us define it, helping us feel it. And it's an emotional output for us, an expression. I think it's really important. And, thank you for that grounding. It was very powerful.
And I chose that grounding because although it is emotional, it's important that we remember like what it actually feels like. Remember that loss, remember that why, because that's a very common question that organizers on the ground will be asked, which is like, why do you do this work? And I think it can't really be described, but it can be felt. And I think that is what that Demetrius was able to capture in that poem. So again, thank everybody just for participating in that, and definitely support the artist. Look him up, Google him, get on his social media and big up him. And we can go to the next slide. So again, I just it's kind of what Tenisha was just saying about the importance of art and movement. This is a painting. If you could drop the artist's name in the chat for folks to be able to take a look at. And her name is Carolyn Lawrence. This is a painting at the Brooklyn's Museum, Brooklyn museums, they have an exhibit, Soul of a Nation. I'm not sure if it's actually still up, but definitely check out that artist. This painting really spoke to me about the importance, and for me, it represents abolition, because abolition is going to manifest through the future generations. So and it's something that we'll also talk about shortly, that abolition is not a destination, it's a journey, it's a process. And we're a part of that process. We're in the now, we're doing the work, we're tilling the soil. And what blossoms, what grows, what can be harvested is something that, future generations will get to see in its full bounty. So yes, we can, I'm not saying that we cannot experience abolition in sorts, kind of like in the here and now in this lifetime, but the true bounty of it will come in the future. And it's when our kids, have no idea what the police even are. It's when the societal harms that happen just don't exist anymore. And so that is also like an important tenet when we're thinking about abolition. And that is what this painting represents for me, Black children being free. So there's a quick video that I'm going to show. It's Patrice Colors, which I definitely want to acknowledge that I'm a student of abolition. I'm not an expert. I'm still determining, and I'm still growing and learning every day. But so I definitely want to acknowledge the folks who have taught me. So Patrice Colors, Adrienne Marie Brown, Angela Davis, Ruth Wilson Gilmore. These are people that we can turn to, but even we can look at the Black Panther Party, we can look at Huey P. Newton and the things that he taught about self-determination, which are themes in abolition, and I think that they're all connected. I also look to, the Haitian Revolution. I look to, Black farmers. I look to people who took their destiny into their own hands and still do. So, but I want to start off with just a quick kind of intro to abolition for folks who may not be familiar. That's really super easy to understand, and then we'll go into some bullet points.
Everybody is probably asking about abolition and what it is. Many of you remember the defund movement last summer. Well, a lot of the defund movement was actually a call for abolition. And to really put it simply, abolition is the getting rid of police, prisons and jails, surveillance, and courts. I know, sounds a little scary, but I promise you there is so much imagination and vision here. Because abolition isn't just about getting rid of something. Abolition is also about, what do we replace it with? What are we imagining? How do we imagine a life where our communities can be safe, where we can have access to healthy food, where we can have access to adequate public education, where we can have access to housing? All that exists in an abolitionist vision. How do we hold people accountable if we're abolitionists? Well, there's a full-on framework that's called transformative justice that allows us to also think about accountability inside of abolition.
Okay. Oh, thanks. Okay, so I'm gonna pass it to Tenisha. She's gonna add some thoughts, which is on a very important point in regards to abolition, which I kind of touched on earlier, that it's really about, it's deeper than changing system structures. It's really about how we recondition ourselves and relearn and unlearn a lot of the things that we have been taught since birth. So
Thank you, Leslie. Right. So Dr. Barbie Wright did a essay on menticide in 1978. It's called The Ultimate Threat to the Black Race, in which he defines menticide as the deliberate and systematic destruction of an individual or group's mind. He goes in further to describe that, unfortunately, Blacks will continue to use white-directed techniques in attempting to try to, make a solution for our issues, but it will be unsuccessful because we have to develop what's called a Black social theory. And what a Black social theory does is determine the destiny of our people by establishing those guidelines of life ourselves and taking control of all life-sustaining properties as well. So it has to define our values, our rituals, our methods of education, how we deal with consequence. The ultimate achievement of a Black social theory is to ultimately develop Black culture. We do have culture within our people. However, we know it's been disenfranchised and broken apart and attacked, and still is. So we are really kind of at the base root of reestablishing what those codes, conduct, and structure is going to look like in our communities in order to be able to, like Patricia said, imagine what this world looks like without a state-defined agenda or definition of what our communities can thrive and be self-determined in imagining what that looks like. So I just wanted to speak a little bit on menticide because I think that we all have been indoctrinated and unfortunately victims of menticide. However, being able to even acknowledge that, speak about it, learn about that definition, and be able to move forward is going to be part of the process of eliminating, that hold on us and getting to that next step, which is, moving towards, like you said, that journey in abolition.
Thank you for sharing that. I think I want to just talk about briefly the tearing down and the building up. We often talk about the tearing down and kind of just like cracking open the carceral system. And so on the other side of that coin, there has to be the building up. So it isn't, and we get into this kind of like back and forth and organizing all the time, where it's like, no, we shouldn't be doing this. We should be focusing on that. And actually there isn't just one thing to focus on. The movement itself, it has, a lot of different arms that touch a lot of different things that are equally important. And so as much energy as we're putting into, dismantling, ending cash bail, changing laws, doing decarceration work, shutting down prisons and youth facilities, we have to put that same energy into building out actual real alternatives in our community that can also be sustainable. And that also takes resources. So we also have to be raising money and figuring out what that looks like. And this is up for debate, I guess, but I'm very much for building our own sustainable networks. And then also when I look at, $16 billion that's coming into Nevada due to COVID. And so it's like, yeah, I don't necessarily want to play with systems as far as like getting money from them or fighting with them over the budget or asking them to defund anything. And also that is our money. That is the people's money. That's money that's been extracted from us in our communities and is owed to us. So I think that it does benefit movement to also focus on that. And maybe that's not your lane to focus on because everybody has a role in movement, but it is a lane that needs to be focused on as far as getting some of that money back. That actually belongs to the people. It's our money. So I think that the building up can look a lot of different ways. I think like right now, which Tenisha can speak to with Organize the State Out, trying to actually build alternatives to calling the police. That just starts with, everybody having 10 people they can call in case of an emergency, finding people in your community that have medical skills or have other types of skills to address, wounds and things of that nature. It's again, raising money so that we can help our people with, their day-to-day needs, the basic needs that have to be met in order for anybody to thrive, for communities to thrive. So I think, you know, there's a lot of different things that go into it, but the building up is, I think, the part that's been kind of like lacking our attention, that we really need to focus on, and we really need to figure out what that looks like in our communities. And I think it even starts with like
Uh-oh, sorry about that. I think we lost a little bit of your audio, Leslie.
okay. Sorry, I don't know how to fix that. What, can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you now.
Okay, sorry. It was my internet. My internet was unstable. Sorry, hood internet problems. So basically what I was saying is that we have to be investing in building up our own networks of support and accountability, which we'll also talk about shortly. Like, what does that look like when harm actually is committed? And I think that goes back also to what Tenisha was saying about menticide, is deprogramming how we look at harm and how we address harm and how we classify harm, because there's a difference between crime and harm. You know, there's harms that, you know, are not crimes. And, oh, yeah, sorry, someone in the chat said my sound is going on and off. Can you guys hear me? Yeah, okay, sorry. Okay, so I'm gonna pass it to Tenisha to add any thoughts on the building up and the tearing down, accountability, what that looks like in our communities. And menticide, Tenisha, can you drop the book in the chat? Or I don't know if that's a thing, if that's how you want us to communicate with questions in the chat. But menticide is a term that comes from history, which I'll let Tenisha explain.
Yeah, I can drop that. The essay that I was referencing was Dr. Bobby Wright's Menticide: The Ultimate Threat to the Black Race, is the one that I was referencing there. And I think that entire essay does go into, you know, a lot of good details about what menticide is, how to address it, you know, what our response should be. We always try to say that, you know, white people don't have any culture, but we do believe that, you know, white people share an almost, you know, silent culture of racism. And it's strong, it's profound, it's prolific, and we see it systematically and across all the boards. So culture is something that is prevalent, and it's something that is, I think, lacking in our community as far as Black people. And that's what needs to be established. So that's what we mentioned earlier, as far as establishing some of those codes of conduct. You know, what are the principles in our neighborhoods, in our communities going to be? How do we establish and build up that love and respect for one another? And then we start to look at how to eliminate then policing and look at, you know, transformative justice that looks like more like protection. What you were talking about as far as the state and some of the work that we do with Organize the State Out, that kind of blossomed out of the people's, you know, call and screams, you know, specifically after the George Floyd murder, for what can we do different? How do we grab, you know, the reins, you know, to be a narrative of the people and for the people and by the people. And I think Larry had mentioned earlier about we don't have to recreate the wheel. We have been left many, many Black prints, as we like to say, from leadership before us, from freedom fighters before us, from organizations like the Black Panther Party and such, that have been grassroots, that have been on the ground, that have been pro-Black, that have been unapologetic in the work that they do. We believe that, you know, historically, this system continues to oppress our communities, withholds and gives us unequal access to resources, to education, you know, across the board. Obviously, wealth gaps. And then also, obviously, like Leslie does work in, massively incarcerates us, murders us without any consequence. So we have to continue to look at defining what the people's justice looks like, not what the state narrative or the state's justice tells us we should be satisfied with. Chairman Fred Hampton taught us about complete satisfaction. So we want to get to that point where we're at a level of complete satisfaction, not partial satisfaction, or we feel appeased or we feel calmed down. We want to get to where we are like Leslie mentioned, you know, seeing our communities and our children and our children's children don't even know what some of those harms were, don't even know what policing is, so to speak, because we've completely reimagined it. We have completely overhauled it. We have created something that serves our community in a non-abusive way. And that's what some of our goals are focused towards.
Thank you for that. Okay, we can go to the next slide. These are just some resources for folks about abolitionist work that's been happening already. There's been organizations that are shutting down prisons and, you know, stopping the expansion of the carceral system. And I think it's important to note that, like, prison, when we're talking about prison industrial complex abolition, we're very much also talking about capitalism. And so we have to take a look at that, and we have to organize around that as well. There's a lot of resources, there's a lot of people that you can reach out to. Again, you can look at Black prints that have already been left for us. The Black Panther Party is a great resource. Critical Resistance is another great resource. Our Prison's Obsolete by Angela Davis is a good place to start, and it's a fast reading. And then Tenisha just dropped it into the chat. Menticide, The Ultimate Threat to the Black Race by Bobby Wright is another good source. And then there's just like basic reading that really just like is about history that I think is also really important, because that speaks to kind of the undoing of the indoctrination that we've all experienced. And for me, that is an important part of abolition, is like retraining our minds around just everything we've been taught. So I think, you know, Christopher Columbus and the African Holocaust by Dr. John Henrik Clarke is a great one that I always refer back to, that really talks about the blueprint brought over by Christopher Columbus that included genocide and the enslavement of the African people, but also included kind of the revisioning and the rewriting of history from the oppressor's lens, which has also allowed for this to continue on. So I think it is really important that we're talking about the work that's been done, and we're talking about kind of how the world looks from oppressed people's lens. I think that that is also a way to fight back against like menticide, as Tenisha was talking about. I just noted, and I spoke to this earlier, that abolition is not a destination, which means it is the doing. It's what you're doing right now, every day, in just basic conversations, you know, with your loved ones. You know, I practice abolition. You know, I practice abolition with my son, but again, it's about practicing. It's about actually experimenting and seeing what works and what doesn't work, and reprogramming ourselves around how we address harm and how we look at punishment as the only solution to harm. We can go to the next slide. And I apologize, I'm gonna speed up a little bit just because we're getting close to time. So this is kind of what I was talking about earlier. Abolition 101, it's a video by Orisanmi Burton. Definitely, it's very clear and concise. It breaks down prison industrial complex abolition, but it really, he gets a little bit deeper into like crime versus harm, challenging the notion of harm and requiring punishment and transformative justice. So, and then I'll show a quick video, but before I say that, I just want to say that, and this is from Orisami's video. He talks about there are many acts that cause harm that aren't crimes, even though it causes incalculable harm. Meanwhile, there are things such as squatting, for instance, that is considered a crime, but actually harms no one. And so we see this in our community all the time. It's like a cognitive dissonance, especially in terms of like right now, how we're up at the legislature and we're, you know, fighting for bills to pass. And it's like literally having to expose and explain the trauma that we see in our communities all the time, just to get them to like stop doing something that they shouldn't be doing anyway. So so again, we have to look at harm, and we have to kind of like detach it from punishment, the carceral state, and crime, because a harm happened doesn't mean that it's necessarily a crime, and that the carceral system is not the only way to address harm. He goes on to say, criminalization, the process by which the state turns a behavior or a person into a crime, should be understood as an exercise of power and privileges property over people. And I'm going to pass it to Tenisha real quick to chime in on this part, but that's essentially the American way, property over people. We were talking about it last night on a call. We were talking about kind of like the follow-up a year later after kind of the so-called uprising. And, you know, that's what we talked about, the fact that like you had federal agents, you had the entire Clark County Police Department out, you know, in front of the federal building, in front of the courthouse, like actually they were there to harm us in as many ways as possible in order to protect these buildings. So it's like that notion of property over people is really something that we have to examine, and it is a part of the root of kind of like everything we're fighting against. And so I wanted to pass it to Tenisha briefly to speak just like on that part.
Thanks, sis. Yeah. Definitely, we've got, you know, a way of thinking that we have to, you know, we say a lot of times so-called crimes, you know what I mean? We really are pushing against, you know, using the state's definition for anything. You know, I make a joke, I say, you know, if the state says go right, I'm going left, because that's how little faith, you know, we have in this system, how little we believe in it, and how much that we see it needs to be changed, transformed, overturned. You know, we define, you hear about revolution, you want to, you know, people want to get guns and, you know, get up and fight back. But I was taught, and we define revolution as gaining the minds and the mass participation of the people. So we actually have to get people in a massive way to get to follow some of these ideas that we have, some of these alternatives that we're talking about in a massive way. And that goes along with establishing the Black social theory, that goes along with establishing these codes of conduct in our communities. But looking at really redefining almost everything we've been taught. When we went to Carson City last week, we you know, did some chalking out front, which I believe in chalking. It's always a, you know, impactful way to send some of our messages. And one of the things that was on my heart to do when I had walked in the building and seen that they still had pictures of slave overseers that we know actually actively participated in slavery, did not fight against it, and, you know, lynched and raped, you know, some of our ancestors, still, you know, adorned on their walls inside. I came outside and really thought about even what we call as cuss words, you know. So a lot of times we get on you know, different forums and like, oops, I'm sorry, did I cuss? You know, and really we define the real cuss words, or the words that should really be offending us, are words like lynching, are words like houselessness, are words like poverty, are words like eviction, redlining, those type of words, mass incarceration. Those are the words that we should hear and actually get really offended by, not, you know, not these so-called curse words that we've been taught, you know, under some religion or some, you know, books or what have you, that's not of our people. So if we're not getting offended by some of those terms, then we really need to reevaluate. And crime and poverty and all of those are some of those other words that we need to think about when people say, oh, they're committing a crime, you know, versus, you know, just surviving, you know, and doing what needs to be done in order to survive in conditions that were not created by us, that are not upkept by us, and are really perpetuated by this system. You know, we say that poverty is profitable. You know, crime is a business, so to speak, as far as the state. And we need to look at truly boycotting the state. truly, like Leslie spoke about earlier, withdrawing our money from them instead of begging them to distribute it and redistribute it in ways that we see fit, not even allowing them to have a hold of our resources in the first place. What does that look like? Can we start imagining that?
Thank you, Tenisha. Okay, so we can go into a quick 2-minute video about transformative justice. And then after that, we're gonna do a brief talk on what is justice for us.
So when I'm trying to explain transformative justice to people, I usually back away from, I don't go straight at, okay, this is transformative justice. I usually actually go back to punitive justice. I start out with like what we're used to and what we've been socialized into is punitive justice. And then I ask people, if I'm in a room full of people, even in, you know, a room full of friends, I'll be like, how many of you grew up in an experience where you were punished when harm happened? And I give examples. You were expelled, you were put in detention, you're suspension, you're put on timeout. But the main move was you're removed from community in some way because you've done harm. And people are like, oh, yeah, you know, everyone either has that experience or they were part of spaces where they saw that experience. And then I'm like, you know, we grow that up so that then you go into prison or you get the death penalty or you get canceled from your community, right? It's the same process. So we live in this, that's what we're swimming in. And then I talk about restorative justice as a steps in the right direction, right? It's like harm has happened. How do we restore ourselves back to that relationship that existed before the harm happened? So I'm like, someone stole your purse, you get an apology, they do some community service. Hopefully we return to like where we were. But for me, I always say that doesn't go far enough because if the original conditions were unjust, then returning to those original conditions is not actually justice, right? You're just going to have someone who's like, great, now I returned everything to you. I still don't have anything and I'm still hungry and I still need something. I'm like, so we need to go further. So to me, transformative justice, the first aspect of it is that it goes all the way down to the root system of the harm and says, how do we change, heal, transform, pull this up? What do we need to do at the root system so that this harm is no longer possible? Like what we're trying to do is stop this harm from ever being possible again. And then how do we understand that the state is so committed to punitive justice, so the state is not going to be able to engage in transformative justice with us. So we don't go to the state to do this kind of deep work. And then how do we turn towards each other to hold this space? And in that turning to each other, we have to say, I believe you can transform.
Thank you. So I don't know if you had anything to add, Tenisha, but I really like that video because it's really short and it really sums up kind of what we have to do outside of the carceral system in order to start addressing harms. And it's not gonna happen and it's not gonna work until we do it. So it doesn't mean that you have to have the answer first before you try something. So it is going to require experimentation and talking to your loved ones in your community and trying to figure things out and having tough combos. So I wanted to add that, and then I'll pass it to Tenisha for some thoughts on the video, and then also getting into like how we define justice for ourselves outside of the carceral state.
Yeah, I think that she's on point in that video, and we have to continue to look at outside of what the state's definition or outside of what their agenda says, and really sit down and have these conversations and determine it. It may look different in different communities. It may not be the same in my neighborhood as it is in yours. One initiative that we've tried and that we are attempting to continue to build is literally one block at a time. So starting with your own household, then going outside to your neighbor and your next neighbor and saying, hey, we want to set aside a time where we're doing a community cleanup, or we're providing basic needs in the community as far as food or clothes. We're teaching the youth, having some sort of a neighborhood rally, so to speak, of where we have these discussions and creating those safe spaces to have those discussions. And even if that's for an hour every week, and we say, hey, during that hour, no one's calling police on this block, or police are literally not allowed in this space during that time. What does that look like? And then during those times, actually, doing something powerful and impactful in your neighborhoods. So we have to continue to build those type of alternatives, those type of coalitions. And it does start, and it does seem like it's small, but we've seen models and we've seen the work of the people happening. We believe in the people that this can happen. And I think we see it happening, especially, just transformatively in the last year, where, some of these discussions and things that we've been yelling about for years and, going out and doing rallies and protests and screaming about that we want, we're actually discussed in platforms, this year. We do set the tone, the people do set the tone in what we reject and what we accept. And we have to continue to, I think, push away from people that are serving the agenda of the state, that are serving the interests of the state. We have to reject them. We have to reject their narratives, their terms, their definitions. We have to change that harmful narrative to what the positive people's narrative is. And we say, drop Black propaganda bombs, positive Black propaganda bombs. We have to actually do that, because they're dropping propaganda bombs on us every single day, through media and TV and music and everything. So we have to dismantle the policies that do not serve us. At one point, even in my life many years ago, I was like, no police, how does that work? I understood that now that, I was a victim of menticide. I wasn't even able to picture it. I couldn't even imagine what it looked like. Well, now I can. And we have to just continue. Part of the work we do is continue going out in the community and sharing that narrative. It's amazing to me how many people don't even think about these options. It's never even, been a hint in their mind that, oh, we can do something besides dial 911 in times of need in our community. And specifically, like you said, in times of harm, not necessarily what is so-called crime. Someone's hungry. I seen a video of a guy last week where, the police came into the store and tackled and beat him because he had went in and grabbed a piece of chicken. He was literally eating a piece of chicken. So we have to also hold some of these businesses responsible that continue to use, the state's definition of response as well. So we should be shouting out and not serving or not, patronizing these businesses that continue to call the police and put us in harm's way. You have a supermarket, you should probably be having a weekly food giveaway. You should probably be having a daily food giveaway. You should probably be, establishing some sort of social norm where continuously you're serving food, since your business is the food service business. So we have to set that tone, though, with some of these businesses and corporations and make those demands and not accept anything else.
Thank you. And then I don't know, Francis, if you wanted us to get into the question and answer piece, because I know we're a little over time.
Yeah, I think that would be good. Larry, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, I think we will. We're going to jump right into those questions and answers. I want to thank Leslie and Tenisha, first of all. It was really, really wonderful. I want to first, before I do that, though, get into just a real quick reminder that folks are experiencing any tech delays, any audio or video delays. We're having a lot on our end, too, so it's not just Leslie. Just be patient with us. We may be slow to some of the audio and video, but we're trying to repair that. But I do want to kind of introduce this next section, which is our reflections and our questions. So I know there's already the chat's going. We've got some really good questions to ask both Leslie and Tenisha. I just want to lift up one of the obvious lessons that I've heard so far, and that is the importance of having an expanded vision of what freedom and self-determination means, and not just something that seems pragmatic in the moment or in a campaign or what is winnable. We can have that discussion. I know you touched on it, Leslie, around the tension that organizers, typical traditional organizers, have about what is winnable, what's realistic in a very specific moment, and what might be something more transformative to work on. We should note that tomorrow, in fact, marks the 1-year anniversary. Tenisha brought up George Floyd, the 1-year anniversary of the murder of George Floyd, which I think in this past year, we've seen these protests go bigger than they've ever gone. but in a way kind of mainstreaming these demands around defund and actually demands even around abolition. So I'm wondering, first to Leslie and Tenisha, if you all could talk about, what, for a lot of people, this is their entry into the movement, right? They may have gone to a rally, they may have gone to a meeting just in the last year. First, can you talk about what your way into the movement was, and then also what you think this past year has done to impact the work you've all been doing for years?
Yeah. So I think my kind of birth into the movement was like a slow kind of like conditioning over time, because I am the child of a Black Panther from Southern California. So I grew up in a radicalized home where my dad was actually kind of retired from the work, but still doing it here and there. I grew up during like the Rodney King riots in LA. So, my uncle was out there in the streets. My family members were out there in the streets as well. So it's always definitely like just been a part of my existence. And then I think I did a lot of work in LA around interrupting violence in our communities, which was really more like responding to violence in our communities now that I'm looking back on it. And from that point, when I moved to Nevada in 2013, that is when I kind of started building here and doing work around police violence initially, and then spreading out and doing more things around just looking at mass incarceration, and then now looking further across borders and really trying to build with Black folks around the diaspora. I think as far as the uprising goes and how it impacted the work, there was a lot of momentum. I think it was a nexus of a lot of different things that were occurring at once. Everyone being on social media, in the middle of a pandemic, folks are home, people have more time, less people working, and it was just kind of like the net, kind of the safety net, the proverbial safety net was pulled out from under us, and we were all kind of in the sink or swim mode. And then they killed another person, and I think it did get more traction because it was shared and shared and shared. Like we talked about this last night. I never even watched the video, but I know exactly what happened just from seeing clips, just from like reading it and just being inundated on my social media. So I think that projected a lot of people into movement that may have never been engaged or known what they could do or wanted to get activated. And coupled and loss and to survive, and just like dealing with your everyday issues, being a single parent, whatever it is, it made it difficult to kind of have the capacity to give everyone political education, get everybody situated and organized, and then like keep building from it. So I think we are, in a sense, catching up now. We're coming out of the pandemic, so-called coming out of the pandemic. And so now we're kind of looking back and saying, okay, like who from the summer can we bring into the more like the long-term organizing? But again, I mean, just being an organizer, I think it's very important to note that, we're swimming in this society, we're swimming in this water that is, has all of these things that try to kill us every single day. So we're trying to survive at the same time that we're organizing, at the same time we're relationship building, we're base building, we're, trying to vision a new world. And so it is very difficult, and it takes a lot of capacity to do so. And it kills you. Someone asked me recently, like, what is the cost of organizing? And it goes beyond burnout. It's like your body gives out, your mind gives out. So it's really difficult. But I think it definitely is a moment. It's an opportunity for movement to grow and expand. And I think we're pushing our narrative further into the mainstream, in particular around abolition, you know, with the abolitionist cries to defund the police, or the demands to defund the police. You know, the fact that that was kind of like called like a, you know, like a silly little slogan by like President Obama. And that's, you know, that's not surprising. But at the same time, that is not true. We know that it is a real demand that came from impacted people on the ground, and that, you know, over $800 million have actually been defunded from the police, you know, nationwide. So I think that that's also important to note, is that we have built power. We have dripped our narrative into the mainstream. And I think that we just have to continue doing that.
Thank you. Great answer. People talk about this all the time, but those moments that spark something larger often rely on an infrastructure of organizing. People think about, you know, Rosa Parks refuses to give up her seat, and then all of a sudden, spontaneously, the civil rights movement happens. But there were organizations in the movement that had been building capacity, building base, talking about expanded visions of freedom. And so, like, when the moment happens, I like that you use the word opportunity, because those marches sort of dissipate. The big moments that the media covers kind of go on to the next big issue, but the movement organizations that are there take advantage and bring folks in. So I'm going to throw it over to Alex, who has a reflection and some questions as well. Alex.
Yeah, thank you both, Leslie and Tenisha. I think it's really important and helpful that you all spent the amount of time that y'all did on language and definitions and visioning, and kind of what is the North Star, what is the journey, and kind of this is like sharing really like all of the resources that y'all have that are super tangible for folks to start thinking about what it might look like and where to start, and being on that journey. And I know we also want to spend some time hearing about like the specific work that y'all are doing on the ground, because y'all are also holding and carrying so much extremely important and radical work in Nevada. And I think that this question that we've got in the chat is connected to that. So I'm hoping that there's a way to also connect that to an example of some work that you have on the ground. But the question is, how do you all know if and when a specific demand, so for example, like qualified immunity or and pattern and practice review, things like that, how do you know that a demand is leading to abolition? And do you have like any examples or stories about a campaign or something that y'all are working on now that could be an example of how do you decide or how are you clear that something is leading you towards abolition versus not?
Yeah, I can hop into that. So there are a number of kind of like guidelines and checklists that you can look at when you're looking at like legislation and policy and figuring out if it is truly a step towards abolition. And I can drop some of those resources actually are in the slide, if we can, you know, flash back to that maybe at the end. But one of the important, and another resource, which I'll just name, is the book by Mariam Kaba, and it's a collection of essays by various people, but it's called "We Do This Till We Free Us." That is a great resource in terms of identifying policy and determining if it is actually leading us towards abolition. Some of the things I look at personally is, does it cause more harm? If a policy that you're creating causes more harm in any facet, in any degree, on any level, to any person on the ground, then it is not an abolitionist reform. Does it expand the carceral state? That's another question. So like, if it is, oftentimes we see, in particular around policing, we see them say, you know, oh, we have to do, you know, implicit bias training, and we have to do, you know, this type of training and that type of training. And, you know, we have special trainers that are going to come from the community. And it's just like, all I care about is how much does that cost? And if it costs more money than y'all already have training for, then I'm not for it. Y'all don't need more money to figure out training. We've been actually investing in training for over like 50 years, probably longer than that. But I know personally, my parents gave public comment in the 80s and 90s around not a solution at all. So I think, again, it's just being real. It's about really calculating what is actually going to happen on the ground and bringing that to legislators. We just had this happen, last week when we were up at the legislature, where there's a bill that adds an amendment. It's a bill around bail, saying that the presumption is released, meaning that the state has to prove whether or not they should be keeping someone in a cage pre-trial. And so how it is now is like you just get put in a cage pre-trial, and then a judge might determine whether or not your bail will be X versus Y, or this amount versus this amount. So I think we're trying to shift that presumption back on the state, and then they want to, unless you have a gun. So unless you have a gun, you're not allowed that presumption anymore. It's not an abolitionist reform, and because we can describe anecdotally all of the ways in which the prosecutors and the police will use that caveat to put our people in cages. So we know that there's going to be harm that comes from that. So that is a bill we are against. So that's just an example in terms of legislation. I just wanted to briefly just respond to a question that I did see in the chat, and then I'll pass it to Tenisha. How do you kind of manifest abolition in your own home, in yourself, and in your personal relationships outside of the work? And I think a good example of that, something that I try to work on daily, is my parenting. Like, how do I respond to harms? Maybe it's not even actually harm, maybe it's just behaviors in a way that doesn't center punishment. And so that's something like, so, we got to get creative, because even a timeout, that can be in alignment with the carceral state. If you think about it, it is removing them from, their environment. It's removing them from, the situation, or it can be looked at a broader scheme. It's removing them from society and giving them time to reflect. But is that necessarily a bad thing if the reflection doesn't harm them? So it's just exploring and experimenting with those things and those questions. And it doesn't mean that we have the answer. I think that that's very important to name, is that like we as organizers, like we don't carry the burden of like having to have all the answers. Like that's all of our responsibility, to get in there and figure it out and test things and bring theory to real life. And it's not easy. There was another question that talked about like sexual violence and what that looks like in terms of abolition. And abolition is for the entire spectrum of harm. And how that's going to look, how it's resolved, what justice looks like for a survivor of sexual violence is going to vary. And we also have to keep in mind that there's a lot of people who are survivors of harm that still have that orientation that the only thing that will bring me justice is the carceral state. So like, how do you deal with that? So I think it's a question. It's not a question that I can answer. It's a question that we collectively can work towards building an answer. And we have a case right now that we're working on around sexual violence, and in this justice process, and in that sense, it makes it a little easier to navigate. But I mean, that's not always the case. So it's just going to take the work of everyone. And I will pass it to Tenisha.
Thanks, Leslie. Yeah, I mean, we say free them all, let the people sort them out. So we want the opportunity, to even determine that. We just don't believe that the system is delivering anything but injustice. So we just want the opportunity to even be able to determine. We're not saying that people that cause harm to the community should get away with it, should be free to bounce around. We just want to be able to determine what that consequence is, and determine that ourselves. Phil Marshall Turok, who's out of Oakland, runs the getarmednow.org coalition. And I just wanted to read the way he defines a primary predator. He says that the primary predator is the state. However, we know that the secondary predator are those that are created under the systems of oppression and disenfranchisement, if I can read, as a means of survival. So we must define and organize in self-determined manners in many different areas: politics, education, nutrition, art, culture, our codes, self-defense. So we have to, in organizing in those, we're going to minimize some of the secondary predators' rise. In establishing some of that, we're going to minimize some of that secondary predators' impact and the harm. We have an African pledge. I don't know if I can drop the picture in the chat, but we have an African pledge. It's a easy pledge, so to speak, to kind of live, set goals by, and make some definitions in regards to. So like Lacey said, even with our children, we say the African pledge every morning. We're trying to, define something different than what we've been given. And as we minimize that second rise of predators, we do that through these immersion programs. We do this by being in the community and serving those basic needs. We do that by kind of educating to define our views and our practices and our history from our perspective, an accurate perspective, not a watered down, changed up version. We put those codes of conduct in place, which are led by those examples. So the African Pledge is a wonderful way to kind of lead by example in our community. And then we also create those liberated spaces, those Black spaces, so to speak, that we say in doing that work where we're free and safe to make other, changes, to communicate these changes. So like Leslie said, no one person should have, the end all be all, so to speak. We're always looking for that leader. In our communities, we can all be leaders. We can all rise up. We can all serve, a purpose in our lanes, and bring to the table, part of what this change and conversation needs to be. But it's going to take all of us. It's going to take that revolution. It's going to take a mass of people, moving towards a common and similar goal in order to achieve that. Harriet Tubman, she went back. She was free. She's a part of our example of a code of conduct because she went back. She got free, but she refused to be complacent and forget about those that were still confined, either mentally or physically. So we believe in that. When people want to struggle, we want to go back. We want to grab us. A lot of times we talk about being comfortable on the plantation. We got a good job. We got a nice house. We got a car. Our family's good, but our people as a mass are still struggling. So we have to kind of, fight to not be comfortable on the plantation and really seek true liberation to get off of it. And that includes going back and grabbing the mass of our people, not just our particular family as well.
Thank you so much, both Tenisha and Leslie. I want to go back to kind of one of the points that you made, Leslie, about how do you determine whether something is moving you towards abolition as far as like our campaigns, our demands, and not. And it reminds me of a time that I was supporting some prosecutor accountability work in Raleigh-Durham, where folks were had done the work of electing a new prosecutor who came from community, and sort of one of the requests that she had of community to support her around was expanding the prosecutor's budget, which they did already have a smaller budget. And kind of the way that she presented it was, this is actually what's going to allow me to implement some of the community demands. And it was really confusing for folks on the ground, right? Like, these are the things that we're asking this particular office to do, but she says that she can't afford it. And so I'm glad that you very clearly named, like, is it bringing more money to the system? If it is, then that is not moving us towards abolition. And ultimately, right, that's the decision that the community made. And Raleigh-Durham is, that sucks, but now it is going to be your job to figure out how to make that happen with the budget that you have, because moving towards abolition means that we actually cannot support you increasing the budget to prosecute and lock folks away, regardless of what you say is for. So, but yeah, thank you both for sharing that. We have 3 respondents from Oakland Kids Rising out in Oakland. The 3 of these folks are also organizers and participants in the Spades work. And so we have Hadia, Dominici, and Peter. So thanks for joining us. They're going to share some thoughts and reflections and maybe some questions. So I'll kick it over to you all.
Hello, everybody. As Alex just introduced us, my name is Hadia. I'm also here with Peter and Dominici. We are program coordinators all at Oakland Kids First. And I just want to thank the presenters. Y'all did a really great job explaining a lot of different things that I was kind of confused about before. I definitely really like the piece about transformative justice versus punitive justice. That's something that we kind of try to resemble in our organizing. We do a lot of equity work with students in OUSD, Oakland Unified School District. And so a lot of the things that we try to do, reformative justice, has a lot to do with the transformative justice that you explained. So that definitely struck a nerve with me, and it's something that I want to continue to try to have us do within our work. So yeah, I really appreciate that. I'm going to pass it over to my coworkers.
Hello, my name is Dominici. I'm with Oakland Kids First, also out here in Oakland. So there was a lot of information that was being put out today. There's like a lot of name dropping as far as like, I like your black print. I was like, what is that? I'm sorry using that. So just being able to like utilize like the lessons from the past, one of the things that that's resonating and that I keep thinking about in the communities is that the conversation of defund and then abolition. So there's people who are progressive, who are leftists, things of that such. And when you say defund, some folks stir a little bit and they go, oh, that's okay. We can do that. Especially during the George Floyd movement in the summer, everybody had the signs and it was on the t-shirts and shit, all that. And then when you go, let's do abolition, folks get really shook and want to shut down conversations, get very defensive. Like, how do we incorporate this ideology and get folks to be part of our base? How can we transform like their thought process to help them, be more supportive in this aspect?
Hi, y'all. Peter over here. Yeah, we all came together. But I was thinking kind of like what Dominici was saying, because our work is particularly in Oakland schools, right? So we work with young people to organize and try to transform the educational system. And one thing that I've always kind of struggled with is when you're working within that system, that system at its root is flawed, raced, classed, capitalist. And when we're doing that work, one of the biggest tensions we continue to have is actually with like the adults, because when we're organizing on campuses, we're also organizing, and most of the time it's like people, there's that weird tension because it's like teachers, and I was a former teacher, are people who are with our young people every single day, and they're actually at the forefront of this. And actually, what does that mean to be transformative and transformatively just with the adults on campus at schools? And then I kind of get stuck in this place of like, from what I've always understood or believed in abolition is like, okay, should I just throw the whole system away and rebuild it? And then what am I doing right now with the school itself? Like, can we rebuild from within? And I guess that's that weird tension of like reform versus, am I actually able to target folks within the school district or within like the teachers in the school, the principals, et cetera, to actually transform? Because even as we pass policies, they're the arbiters, they're the ones who carry it out, right? Or they don't. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about.
Yeah, that's a tough one. That's definitely the struggle. So I think for as far as like defund language, I guess I'll start there. I think one thing that I've been kind of talking about is the fact that like defund the police, that is a demand that came from impacted people on the ground. And so by the time it gets shuffled up to kind of like the grass tops level where you see, elected officials talking about it, the president's talking about it, administration and within systems is talking about it. It's not their demand to own. And there was a lot of co-opting that happened with the Democratic Party, kind of like taking on the defunding the police, but then shying away from it and being like, oh no, that's a little too radical. I don't want to do that. And I think it takes me back to what I was saying earlier about cognitive dissonance. We know that they've been actually defunding all of the programs in our community for decades, probably all of your life, probably all of my life. They've been taking money out of mental health, taking money out of education, taking money out of any type of actual resource that our community needs to thrive, and putting more money into policing and really just the carceral system in general. So because we know that to be fact, there's plenty of data around this, there's plenty of research around this. I feel like we can hold the line and we can say, no, really defund the police. And so I think it's more about like what you want to represent. If an elected official or something is like, oh, I don't want to say defund, I want to say reprioritize the budget or reallocate or whatever word they want to use, that's fine, as long as they're executing the intent, which is moving money out of that system and putting it into a system that supports the people. But like for me personally, I still say defund, I don't care, because no, it's real. And we do have to think about the ways in which they don't want us to call a spade. And that was not a pun intended, because this is like a spades thing. But it's just like when they tell me, oh, why do you say cages? I've had reporters ask me that, like, oh, why do you say putting someone in a cage? Like, have you been to jail? It is like, there's actual bars, still bars, and it is a cage. So I'm not like being dramatic, or I'm not, over exaggerating the situation. And so it's kind of the same thing when we're saying defunding the police. No, that is exactly what needs to happen. So I think it's kind of like an internal question, and it also has to do with strategy and who's saying what. But when it comes to us, we do have to speak our truth, and we have to, be tenacious with it. And eventually the shock of it will wear off. And then, 5 years from now, that'll be a talking point for the Democratic Party or something like that, because that's the way things go. So that would be my advice. And then as far as like navigating systems players, I think with abolition, again, it's not like, it's something that you're gonna have to do in your everyday interaction. You know what I mean? So it's not necessarily only or solely rooted in like your campaign or what your campaign goals are. It's how you show up. So if you're at a school site and it's like, maybe some of those teachers need political education, maybe they need to have their minds opened up to like what it is we're trying to build. So maybe that can be like an investment area of energy and time. But eventually bringing them on that journey is a part of the work too. And that is abolition, because it is a part of it is going to be about shifting as society, like shifting how we look at harm and how we address harm, and how we, actually heal as well. Like healing has to also be a part of this. But it is hard. I think change can happen within a system and outside of a system at the same time. And it's not like this or that. And I think that is what, that's the message I always try to give to young people, is it's not like one way to do this. It's not one way that's gonna get us liberated. We're gonna have to have the inside people who are changing material conditions right now for people within systems right now. We can't ignore their conditions because we're looking at the broader thing that we're trying to change, you know? So I think it has to be happening at the same time. We're working on conditions on the inside. We are, you know, changing policies on the inside. We're doing political education with, you know, systems players on the inside. And at the same time, we're building outside of the carceral state. And at the same time, we're changing policy. At the same time, we're protesting. So it's like all of these things work together to move us collectively towards liberation. And then I will pass it to Tenisha. Hopefully that was helpful to y'all. And thank y'all for the work you're doing. It's awesome. I love seeing young people do the work.
Thanks, Leslie. Yeah, exactly. Concentrate on the youth. You know, you mentioned like teachers or older people, whatever. It's hard to get through to some old people set in their ways. You know, Minister Huey said that the revolution has always been in the hands of the young always inherit the revolution. So that's because, you know, youth are open and, you know, palatable, so to speak, and willing to, you know, not be so set in stone in different ways. We all have different conditioned beliefs that we're raised on and come up with. But that's what we're pretty much working on in these spaces is how do we create a different conditioned response than maybe what was created in us. And based on changing those beliefs, now we have a different interpretation. Now we have a different decision making. We take a different path than, you know, those maybe before us. So, but there's many different lanes, like Leslie said. I think that we can be worked, you know, in two directions at one time. Defund is a process that may, and we hopefully will ultimately lead to abolition. But we're not saying that, you know, defund and then, you know, tomorrow there's no police on the streets. You know, we know that this is a process. We know that it's going to take work. And we know that we're behind enemy lines. So in many areas, we have to continue to set the tone, you know, like we spoke about earlier, you know, so continue to challenge, you know, those teachers or those people with their thought process and with their, you know, absolute rhetoric, you know, continue to ask the questions. I mean, like, that doesn't make sense, you know. You know, we say accept the concessions, but don't compromise the principles. So we may have to, as we're working behind these lines, so to speak, you know, take some of what they're giving us, use some of these resources, but, you know, keep our principles, you know, and our ultimate goals in mind. There's a term called intellectual masturbation. So a lot of people want to sit down and have all these discussions and they've got this degree and they went to this school and, you know, so-called, you know, rose up in the, you know, state defined or white defined, you know, hierarchy of success, but haven't never even touched down in some of these communities. They're completely out of touch or unrelatable to what's really happening. You know, so we say, you know, get in the ring, so to speak. You know, a shadow boxer is probably the greatest athlete in the world until he gets in the ring with maybe Mike Tyson or something like that. You know, you really got to box, you know, sometimes. And some of the greatest experiences I've had is just getting, you know, what we say, putting our ear to the ground with the people, you know, getting with the people and actually, you know, asking what is needed and learning what the actual impact is. And, you know, knowing how the police are responding in their community. But like Leslie spoke about earlier, you know, as far as the definitions of defund and abolition and those challenges, Malcolm taught us about, you know, the co-opting, the watering it down, and then changing it and making it something it was never meant to be. So we have to continue to stand on what we know our definitions are, continue to set that tone, and continue to demand that, no, it's not this, we're not going to change it up. It's what we've said and we're sticking with that. So just be steadfast in your work. As you determine those definitions, you know, don't let anybody switch them up and you know, change any of those words out for anything else. Brutal terms for brutal reality. So like Leslie mentioned, the cages, you know, we say, you know, these prisons are concentration camps. You know, when you've got a space that is lacking healthy food, lacking healthcare, lacking, you know, mental health services, lacking physical health services, you know, that's nothing short of a concentration camp. These are not rehabilitation centers in any way. We don't say police brutality. We say police terrorism. We say police violence. because it's brutal terms for brutal realities. This is really what we're facing. Use those harsh words and be steadfast in them to get the point across, and setting that tone in a non-apologetic way.
And then I would just add one more thing, is just kind of, off of what Tenisha just said, is, this is also when you say like, no, I'm going to stick to what I said, which is like defunding the police or whatever it may be. I think that it's a refusal. It's a refusal of the narrative that we know is being written right now. If we look, back at colonization, we were never taught that it was the genocide of indigenous people and the enslavement of African people. We were taught that it was, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria sailed the ocean blue, or however that saying went. Like, that's literally what we were taught. So again, when you're saying, no, that is an actual concentration camp, that is an actual cage, we do need you to actually defund the police. It's important for that language to be out there in the atmosphere, because 100 years from now, when folks are reading about what happened to us, it is going to be the oppressor's story, is that, oh no, we had rehabilitation centers. So I think it is important to like challenge that narrative and recognize that it's a tactic that is used, that is a part of their blueprint to oppress us.
Well, I'll jump in here. Thank you. First of all, thank you, Oakland Kids First organizers. Those are really great questions, and for all the work you're doing. And to Leslie and Tenisha for some outstanding answers. You both really anticipated a lot of the questions that ended up coming into the chat, and that Alex and I had, I think. So really, really well done. I love the metaphors always about the ground, not just grassroots and grass tops, but the cultivating of the soil, which what organizers do, right? That's what the term spade work comes out of. And actually just this idea of constantly trying to shift the terrain, shift the work that was sort of framed before you, both politically and by other organizers in the past, but shifting that terrain and insisting on a new framing of ideas is a transformative, it's really part of the transformative work that's being done now. So I love all the allusions to history, both historical figures, but also, and I think Leslie mentioned this, the Rodney King sort of aftermath of the verdict of those LAPD cops who beat up Rodney King in the early 90s. It's not that long ago, the really, really bad old days of the law and order policies, which, have continued to this day, but the 80s and 90s law and order policies, where it wasn't just, mainstream activists who were dealing with kind of how hard it was to kind of reframe the stuff, but organizers on the ground who would be confronted with a lot of what you all talked about, which is the receptivity of the community to hearing bolder, more radical ideas. Maybe community members who said, well, it would be a victory in this community if we had more cops, and fighting against that maybe that instinct or that feeling. So I think it's really important to kind of look at these last several decades of organizing around these issues as again, like reframing the debate, shifting the terrain, and I appreciate the both of you for doing that. I have a question for both of you as well, for Leslie and Tenisha, if you can offer our organizers of today. I mean, you talked about it a little bit with the Kids First organizers, but what piece of advice, you've all been in the work for years, you've dedicated your lives to this work. What sort of advice do you normally give young organizers who are coming into the work?
I guess I can go. I think just take care of yourself. I would say like pour into yourself, think about what you're passionate about, what you love, and bring that into your organizing, or let that be your organizing, definitely heal, think about just the impacts of white supremacy on us are so profound and so harmful. So I think that we have to heal from that, and healing looks different for different people. So it's just like investigating the different modalities of healing and figuring out what works for you and prioritizing that, because that is a part of the work. We cannot like get to this liberated place and we're still, you know, embodying white supremacy ourselves. So we have to really heal from that, and we have to center that in everything that we do, and especially in the work that we do. And it's like, that looks like setting aside time, you know, to pour into yourself. That looks like, you know, working in your gifts, whatever your gifts are, like bringing those to movement. How can those get us closer to liberation? And you know, it's in learning to say no, and just really doing so unapologetically.
Yep, I agree with everything Leslie said. You know, do the work, you know what I mean? That internal work, like Leslie said, heal the trauma and damage. We are all a damaged people. We've all been impacted by white aggression and by white domination, and by systemic oppression, in many ways. So heal that trauma and that damage. We believe that a spiritual healing or spiritual warfare is going to be a part of the work, and is a part of the work that we bring into the community of what we do. We do political education, we do the, you know, the spiritual healing and kind of rounding of it as well. Like Leslie did the grounding at the beginning. Prioritize you. A lot of times we can get passionate about somebody else's passion or somebody else's dream, somebody else's vision. You know, figure out and get in your lane and figure out what your passion is. Because you know, you can go gung-ho for somebody else's legacy, so to speak, but you know, our life is what we leave, what legacy we leave. So that should be what, you know, our ultimate goal is. Be unapologetic, you know, in our power, in our Black power. We know that Black power is a symbol of unity, of community, of strength. We are striving and working to regain our identities, claim our history accurately, and uplift our families, raise our children. You know, we have been disenfranchised. You know what I mean? We are at basic needs level. We are having to still feed the belly just so that we can get to the mind. So, you know, elevate in your Blackness unapologetically. It's our essence, you know, raise it up proudly, claim it proudly. And, you know, I just say, like I said earlier, you know what I mean? Maybe accept some of those concessions, but never compromise your principles, never compromise those principles. So I love to see the youth working, and love to see the youngsters out of Oakland. You know, we'll look forward to maybe building some coalitions with them at a later time, because I truly believe that the youth is where, you know, the heart of where we're going, and that's who we need to be putting in the forefront, and who we need to be ultimately following is these youngsters' ideals and ideologies and their ideas, because they're the ones going to be leading the way. So salute to y'all.
Thanks, Tenisha. In a true organizer fashion, always looking for ways to connect with people. I love that. I'm going to throw it over to my co-host, Alex, who may have some final thoughts, and then we're going to kind of close here. So Alex, all yours.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Leslie and Tenisha. Tenisha, I hope to get to meet you in person. If you're in Vegas, I'm here. So let's link up. But yeah, I think this is the topic of abolition is not one that is new, right? But it's getting a lot of attention right now because, like you said, the world stood still for a while, and I think a lot of us got an opportunity to be more present in our own lives and in our communities, and to witness more of what's happening around us. And this is just in general a whole lot to try to cram into, right, a 2-hour session. And I think you all did a really beautiful and artful way of really introducing some of the core principles and understandings, with a strong emphasis on, like, we're all in a learning journey together. And so I really appreciate that. I think a lot of a lot of folks that we've been talking to recently, obviously connected to the pandemic, have been figuring out mutual aid work for the first time. And I know that that's something that you all have also been doing in like kind of many different forms well before the pandemic. So I also think that it was super important and helpful. Even what you ended on, Tenisha, around like we do still have to feed the belly while we're trying to get to folks' minds and hearts around this. So yeah, just super grateful for y'all coming and sharing with us today. And I will start to close this out. Or is there something you want to say, Larry, before I start to close this out?
I just want to echo what you just said there, and that is to obviously thank Leslie Turner and Tenisha Freedom. Such a really important discussion, not just timely, not just topical, always topical, obviously, but the great lessons. And I also want to remind people that there's some important resources that have been dropped in the chat throughout the last couple of hours. So make sure you're looking into those websites and books and articles, and just really important resources. So thank you for all those of you who put the questions and the resources in the chat. Alex, I think you might want to give us a little word from our sponsors, upcoming.
There we go.
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So yep, a word from our sponsors. Again, thank you to Leslie, to Tenisha, and to our respondents from Spadework, Hadia, Dominici, and Peter. If you all as viewers and participants were inspired by this session and want us to keep going and want it to keep going, then please go to the link that's going to drop in the chat right now to make a donation. And your contribution will go towards the development of organizers in Spadework. Spadework is a new national organizer training program to nurture the next generation of organizers of color. So like I said, Dominici, Hadia, and Peter were all three a part of the first cohort of organizers in Spadework. And yeah, Larry, do you want to tell folks a little bit about the next session?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Alex. Quick programming adjustment. Normally we are here on Monday mornings on the West Coast here from 10 to 12. Next session, our 6th episode, in fact, you can see there, development and displacement in the Philippines. We're gonna have a really great story about the Marcos era, martial law era organizing against development and displacement in the Philippines. And that's a story that you'll be able to hear about live next Tuesday. So not Monday, but next Tuesday, June 1st. From 4 to 6 p.m. Pacific time. So the slight adjustment on the schedule. You can see the other upcoming weeks as well. And we have an open week there at week 9. We want to remind people, because the deadline's coming up later this week, that we are still accepting suggestions, ideas for which sort of story, what sort of movement history recollection you all want to kind of get into. So we've got some great ideas so far, but you'll see there, you can share your ideas at that email, admin@spadework.school. But you can see the schedule coming up. We've got some really great sessions that hopefully are as great as today's session. So again, thank you to all of our presenters. A special thank you to Ale and Jose for your great interpretation work. To Matt, who I know had yeoman's duty today, extra tech guru duties. I want to thank you all for joining us. We appreciate you all. Continue to stay safe and healthy and take care, and we will see you next week. Bye-bye.